Recently, the idea of a DOGE refund check to American citizens based on the money that the Department of Governmental Efficiency will save has been floated all over social media. And while the original amount started at $5,000 checks, I've seen people saying that it might be as high as $8,000. Now, of course, for $8,000 to be possible, then $5,000 would also have to be possible. So that's the number that we're going to use in this video because it's the lower bar to pass. So in this video, we're going to go over the numbers for the various different scenarios that this might happen under. We're also going to talk about the feasibility. Is this possible? And we're going to cover what would likely happen to the economy if these checks were sent out. And then I'm going to give you my opinion. Do I think this is going to happen under any of these scenarios, which we're going to cover? And I'd, of course, love to hear your thoughts as well, so feel free to leave them in the comments below. As always, my name is Derek, and I got my degree in finance, so you don't have to. Let's get started. So this proposal, which is not official, by the way, was started by James Fishback. He's a CEO at an investment firm. And in his initial idea, he said that every taxpayer should receive this $5,000 dividend. But he also added a formal breakdown of his proposal. In that, he said that every tax-paying household should receive this $5,000 dividend. And this matters because the number of households that pay taxes is very different from the number of taxpayers, which is also very different from the total population of the United States. So let's go over all the scenarios, from least likely to most likely. And the first of those is to pay everyone a $5,000 check. Currently, there's roughly about 340 million people in the United States. And that means that if every dollar found or saved by DOGE was used to pay every single American a $5,000 check, it would cost $1.7 trillion. But that's not what was proposed. What was proposed was to use 20% of these savings to pay out these refund checks, which means in this scenario, to only use 20% to pay out $1.7 trillion in refund checks, DOGE would have to find or save $8.5 trillion in total. This is more than the entirety of the US annual budget. And this is almost impossible to do, even over the entire 4-year term. So this is the least likely scenario. Now, of course, this wasn't what was proposed. The original statement was all taxpayers. Now, I would assume that this doesn't mean everyone who files a tax return. That's about 150 million people. I would assume that this means everyone who pays a net positive amount into taxes. That number is roughly 100 million people. And if we do that math, if DOGE used every single dollar that it finds or saves, they would have to find $500 billion. But again, the proposal was to use 20% of the money saved, which means that DOGE would have to find or save $2.5 trillion. This, for reference, is larger than the yearly national deficit for the budget. It's an extremely huge number, and again, even over the entire 4-year term, it's unlikely that DOGE will be able to cut or save $2.5 trillion, which means that while not as unlikely as the first scenario, it's still very unlikely to happen. But in his official write-up, James Fishback clarifies that he actually means tax-paying households. This means that only the households that paid into taxes for the 2025 tax year would receive this $5,000 refund check. While there's 130 million or so households in the United States, only roughly about 79 million pay into taxes on a yearly basis, which means that they would need to cut 79 million $5,000 checks. And in that scenario, if DOGE used every dollar that they found or saved, they would need to find or save $395 billion. But again, the proposal suggested only using 20% of the saved money, which means that DOGE would need to find or save $1.975 trillion. Now, of course, where is this number coming from? It's coming from the fact that Elon Musk originally said that DOGE might be able to save the American taxpayer $2 trillion. With that said, he has recently walked that estimate back and said that in reality, it would probably be closer to $1 trillion. But this is the most likely scenario. $395 billion is a lot of money. It's about half of the US military budget on a yearly basis, but it is possible. We sent vastly more money during the 2020 and 2021 stimulus checks. So in my opinion, if any of these scenarios are actually going to happen, it would be this one, paying out only the 79 million households that pay into taxes in 2025. With that said, I already see a huge issue. What if someone paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, say 5 years ago, into taxes, but now they're retired and they don't pay into taxes? They're just living off their assets. Those people then wouldn't be entitled to this refund check, even though they paid significantly into the tax system? I'm not really sure how you cleanly do this. And that, of course, leads me to feasibility. Is this feasibly possible? Well, in my opinion, it is unlikely that DOGE will find or save $2 trillion, even over the entire 4-year term. Elon Musk has already walked this down to $1 trillion. And in reality, if we look at the numbers so far on the government website, about $55 billion has been saved. That seems like good progress so far, but I see two problems with this. The first is that obviously, savings are going to be front-loaded. This is kind of like when you're sweeping your floor. You first get a bunch of dirt into the pan, but that last little bit of dirt is always impossible to get off the floor, and you got to keep sweeping and keep sweeping. Basically, saving money in the government would likely be similar. The first few major cuts are going to be low-hanging fruit, but as you progress, it's going to get harder and harder to find areas to cut. So a $2 trillion savings is, in my opinion, extremely unlikely. Even $1 trillion seems unlikely. And that's not to mention that this $55 billion or so in savings is already being disputed left and right. There are reports of inaccurate contract amounts, and there's one notable example where Elon Musk quoted that he saved $8 billion on a contract, but the actual contract amount was $8 million. DOGE then didn't reduce the $55 billion total savings by that amount until they were called out again, which they then adjusted the savings amount. The point is, even the least expensive option, which would be to give this refund to only the 79 million households that pay into taxes, which would cost $395 billion, is hard to achieve just on savings, in my opinion. Now, could DOGE prove me wrong? Absolutely. I hope they find $394 billion of actual savings to cut from the government. With that said, I wouldn't count on it. And before we talk about the effects on the economy, I think this foreshadows my opinion, which is that I don't think it would happen. And that's also because Congress would have to approve these payouts. And right now, the Republicans have such a slim majority in both the House and the Senate that it would require near unanimous support. And here's the problem. There are Republicans who are extremely fiscally conscious. They're not going to want to approve a massive payout. If this money is found or saved, those Republicans are much more likely to want to use it to pay down the national debt or increase spending in other areas that they deem necessary, like military spending. So no, I don't think any of these scenarios is likely to happen, not even the least expensive option, and not even at $5,000. So definitely not at this new $8,000 number that's being thrown around. Okay, now let's talk about the effects on the economy. What if it did happen? What would this do? Well, in my opinion, it would absolutely increase the prices of goods, which means it would increase inflation in a time where inflation already is reaccelerating for the last 4 months in a row. And I'm pretty confident in this because we literally have recent data that shows what happens when the government sends out stimulus checks. Now, James Fishback says that these refund checks won't cause inflation because people are more likely to save the DOGE refund check. I don't really know how or why, but in my opinion, I would respectfully disagree. When you hand people money, they're going to spend it, especially right now in an environment where things are extremely expensive and people can barely afford daily life. A lot of people are very likely to spend this money. And when you pump anywhere from $395 billion all the way to over $1 trillion into the economy, you're going to end up with price inflation. And as we've seen before, once prices increase, companies don't really like to lower them, which means prices are sticky. And when we look at the very recent example of stimulus, research shows that up to 30% of inflation can be attributed to that stimulus. So while yes, this would absolutely increase consumer spending, increase profits for companies, potentially increase the stock market, I also think that inflation would be a very real symptom of a massive refund check given to Americans. And no, I don't think the majority of Americans would save this money, mostly because of normal consumer behavior, but also because we're living in a time where living is expensive. And that's not even to touch on the fact that this is a regressive refund to begin with. Basically, what that means is that it helps higher income earners and disproportionately hurts lower income earners, because people who don't pay into taxes would not receive a refund check. And again, I don't really see how you do this cleanly. If someone paid millions into taxes a few years ago but now are retired or they don't have income, they're not going to receive a refund check even though they shouldered a huge burden of this wasted spending. So all in all, I don't think this is going to happen, and I don't think that you should wait around for it to happen. But at the same time, I hope that government spending, especially wasteful spending, can be cut. And I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. So I hope this video was informative in regards to this proposal. If it was, please consider subscribing. It helps out the channel tremendously. And if you like personal finance, world economics, and investing, you're in the right place. So I hope to see you around for the next one. Until then, take care.